Christine, I have to tell you, you have to watch them cook. I have to watch my mother-in-law cook. I have to watch everyone cook because you know what? They leave out something in there that you don't watch them.
You miss it.
Fate vedere la faccia e l'occhienire.
Kind of tell everybody a little bit about the film we're talking about and what it's about and everything for people.
Sure. I would describe this as a meditation more than anything else.
Nice.
On life and memory and aging through the lens of Italian food and culture. This is my dad's side of the family, a bunch of loud Italians. Over the pandemic, I found hours of 8 and 16 millimeter footage of that side of the family from the 30s through the 60s. And it was in great shape. And I got it scanned in 4K and I was just like, I have to do something with this. I was like, you guys have no idea how lucky you are to have this footage.
Okay.
So I need to make something out of it. And at the same time, the subjects of the film, are approaching death. And so at the time I was motivated by that and I wanted to make a tribute to them. And then it kind of turned into something a bit bigger and a bit more universal than just my insular family.
Every subject matter has harsh realities to it and interesting concepts, and obviously death being probably the ultimate interesting concept. But there was really it was like a warm hug at the end of your film. It really was. I mean, it felt like, okay, if they're cool with it, I'm cool with it. Let's move on with life, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And this is like an acceptance of death,
Mm-hmm.
Through celebrating life as it's meant to be celebrated. Obviously, we know it's inevitable, but I think to really accept it and find joy in it is a whole other conversation that maybe people aren't having as openly. But I found immense comfort in having those conversations about death.
Sure. I always love this, talking about this with documentarians too, is the idea that you had this, you get this notion of doing a film. You either get the subject matter, you get, like you said, some rare footage that you got to do something with, that you're figuring it out. But you go into this with an expectation or an idea that this is the film I'm going to make. Then you start to sit down with the people that you're making the film about. You're interviewing them, and it becomes like its own little flame, right? It starts to waver in its own direction. It goes up and down and has its own breath and its own life. And then you're kind of like forced to pivot or figure out what that happens. And I'm kind of curious for you, where along in this process did you feel that happening to your film?
I think I went into it before we started shooting with a very open mind, because it was also so personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was very accessible to me, and I really kind of wanted to let them tell the story. So I had a list of questions, and that's really, obviously we storyboarded and we did what we needed to do, but I really didn't want to put too much pressure on thinking of how everything was going to be put together in the end. Mm-hmm. Then they obviously took things in a totally different direction, which was amazing. But where I think it really happened was in the editing room. And we had all of these fragments of footage, and then we had fragments of modern day footage that we shot. And I wanted it to be more cohesive.
Okay.
But then through the process, I was like, well, what story am I telling? I'm telling that we remember life through fragments of memory. And so that should be reflected in the editing. And I kind of wanted to take it through almost like a Sunday dinner, the stages of a Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
And, as you eat and you talk and you have wine, then the interesting stuff starts to come out. So I think we had to do a lot of pivoting in the editing room because we had so much footage. There wasn't that connecting piece between the Sunday dinner and then transitioning to the talk about
Serious
death.
talk. Yeah.
So we had to kind of figure that out and just go with what we had, which was
Yes.
a great exercise in letting go of control.
Did you learn anything about yourself that you didn't know going into this, that through talking to them you learned or that you've experienced when you started to put this thing together?
I think more than anything that like a sense of intimacy needs to be present in everything that I do, and that I'm always kind of digging to get to the roots of a situation. I mean, my family is my family. It's almost so hard for me to step outside of this
Sure.
piece because it's just me. It's just inside of me. But I think I also learned that maybe I'm okay with death, and maybe that's a horrible thing to say, but there's beauty in it. So
Yeah,
to
sure.
to find beauty in it was something that I learned and tried to implement into my life moving forward.
I just spoke to Hannah, who did My Parent Neil, the documentary.
I'm really
She
looking forward to seeing that.
she was talking about how she was so inside of it that it really helped her to get an outside perspective and get feedback from her, because she was doing it for her thesis in Cal Arts, and it really helped her to get her classmates who were documentarians along with her to get their feedback and kind of help her, because she was so in it that it was hard for her to kind of figure that out. Did you feel like you had that collaborative process as well somewhere along the line? Did you feel like you kind of needed that to kind of stay, like you said, you were inside a lot and of what you were doing, it was very personal?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I made this side by side with my DP, who's also my editor. And that was great, but he also knows my family very well, is very much a part of my life. So we worked on this very insularly for probably 8 months before we showed it to anybody. That's how I prefer to work. But when we reached that point, I was like, I can't look at this anymore. I have no idea what this is and how it's going to be received. And so I shared it with close friends who are also filmmakers. And I tried to share it with people who were older, younger, people who came from a similar background and people who didn't. And it was very helpful to get that feedback, because at a certain point I was like, I have no idea what this is anymore. And I'm sure when you work on any sort of project, narrative or documentary, you get to that point.
Yeah, especially that point.
Yeah.
You've seen it 1,000 times. You're like, okay, I can only dot the I's and cross the T's so many times, right?
I know, exactly.
All right. So tell me, what do you love about indie film? What makes you crave it? What do you keep coming back to do independent film?
Independent film is just reflective of filmmaking more so than commercial filmmaking. I think that it's reflective of stories and real people. And when you take out the, big budget money aspect of it, how do you get creative about your storytelling? And that to me is so much more interesting. But the doors are just open for people, and it's less rigid, I think. And as a young filmmaker, I think that's really exciting, because you don't have to follow the rules. I'm a huge Cassavetes fan, and he kind of laid the groundwork for independent filmmaking. And so to follow his philosophies and ideals on independent filmmaking is something that's very important to me.
Yep. Let me call up my friends and see what they're doing this weekend, and let's shoot something, right?
Yeah. And there are obviously amazing commercial films,
Sure, absolutely.
of course, and I would love to be in that world one day, but there is a certain respect that I have for people who continue to make independent films, because I think you have to love it. You have to love what you're doing, and you have to be a creative person and be in it for the right reasons, because it's not going to be necessarily rewarding in terms of, you know, commercial success.
Troppo onesto fino all'osso, una vita fatta